When I was snuggled up under the same cozy blanket with my son, watching TV, an accidental touch led to a new chapter in our story. In my life, there was no one else but my son, and from that day on, he became my entire universe. He wasn't just my son anymore, he had evolved into my everything. You see, my husband had tragically passed away in a truck accident many years ago, leaving me alone in this world. Since then, my son had been my pillar of support, the reason I kept going. I found myself yearning for a different kind of relationship with my son, a relationship filled with boundless love, where there were no restrictions, and no one could interfere, no matter what we did. I quite liked this idea because for so many years, I had been longing for such a connection. I had always been faithful to my late husband, and now, I felt a shift in my feelings. To be honest, I'm 40 years old now, a single mother, and my son is 19. 20 years ago, I had a love marriage with a wonderful man named Henry. Our married life was filled with love and happiness. When we were in a live-in relationship, I got pregnant, and soon after, we tied the knot. However, our marital bliss was cut short. Exactly 15 years after our marriage, my husband died in that fateful truck accident. After his passing, I was in a very dark place. I missed him terribly and often wondered what was the point of living in this world without him. But then, my son would come to mind, and I would remind myself that I had to be there for him. His life had just begun, and I couldn't leave him alone. So, I held on, and today, I live happily with my son. I no longer feel the void left by my husband because I've come to believe that in some way, my husband lives on through our son. My son has all the endearing habits of his father, and he loves me deeply. He's very attentive to me, taking care of me like a loving partner. He's always worried about me making friends with others, and he even keeps me from meeting my female friends. He watches over me closely every day, but I don't mind this at all. I believe that a relationship built on mutual concern and care can last a lifetime, so I accept my son's protectiveness. Let me take you back to a few years ago when my son's health took a turn for the worse. I rushed him to the hospital, where the doctor informed me that he had malaria and had lost a significant amount of blood. The doctor chided me for not bringing him in earlier, saying that the malaria had spread throughout his body. My son was hospitalized for 15 days. For the first 8 days, I prayed ceaselessly to God, begging for my son's recovery. I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. Thanks to God's grace, my son eventually recovered, and I brought him home. He was extremely weak, so much so that he couldn't even walk to the toilet on his own. I had to assist him with everything. I spent countless hours taking care of him. He was very quiet and seemed lost in his thoughts, and I knew he needed a special kind of love. I asked him what was wrong, if he needed anything, but he said no. Then I asked if he had a girlfriend. He remained silent. I reassured him that he didn't have to be afraid, that I just wanted to know so that he could talk to her and feel better. He then told me that he didn't have a girlfriend, and for some reason, I felt a strange sense of happiness inside. I ended the conversation there and gave him some food. After he ate, he went to rest, and I turned on the TV for him. I went to the kitchen to do some chores, thinking it would take at least an hour before I could go back to his room. It was 11 p.m., and the door to my son's room was slightly ajar. I know it's wrong to peek into someone's room, but I couldn't resist checking if he was awake or asleep. To my surprise, I saw his bed shaking violently. I quickly opened the door, and he immediately pretended to be asleep. I called his name, trying to wake him up. He tried to convince me that he was in a deep sleep, but I called him louder. Finally, he asked me what was wrong. I said I just wanted to make sure he didn't need anything before I went to bed. When I looked at him, I could tell he was up to something. His body was covered in sweat, as if he had just finished a strenuous workout. It was winter, and people were using heaters, so it was strange for him to be sweating so much under a normal blanket. I understood what was going on, but I didn't say anything. I was feeling cold myself, so I fetched a thick blanket for him and took away the old one, scolding him that the thin one wouldn't keep him warm and he might catch a cold and get sick again. He kept saying he wanted the thin blanket, but I ignored him and wrapped him in the thick one. As I was taking the blanket to the washing machine, I noticed something on it. It looked like ice cream, with lots of stains. I was puzzled because there was no ice cream in the fridge. How could there be ice cream on the blanket? When I opened the washing machine to put the clothes in, I was shocked to see that it was filled with my clothes, including my bra and nightdress. I had washed all my clothes the day before and cleaned the washing machine thoroughly. So, how did these clothes end up in there? When I picked them up, I saw that there was fresh ice cream on them too, and my hands got dirty again. I love ice cream, but I knew this wasn't ice cream. When I tasted a bit of the substance on my nightdress, I realized what it was. I quickly went to the bathroom to wash my hands and drink some water. I put all the clothes in the washing machine and started it. As I watched the washing machine spin, my mind was filled with all sorts of thoughts. The taste of that substance had reminded me of my past with my husband. I sat down beside the washing machine and started crying, remembering all the loving moments we had shared. Those memories were an integral part of my life. That night, I went to bed, and my son heard me crying softly. He came to me and asked what was wrong. He kept asking, and I just kept crying. Then he hugged me and wiped away my tears. He seemed to understand that I was missing my husband. After a while, I calmed down, and my son suggested we go out and sit on the sofa and watch TV. He took my hand and led me to the sofa. He told me not to cry, that it made him sad too, and he even swore that he wouldn't let me shed another tear. I put my finger on his lips and told him not to swear, that I couldn't bear to lose him. We looked at each other, and then he covered me with a blanket and sat beside me, turning on the TV. We started watching a program. It was 1 a.m., and then my hand accidentally touched a place it shouldn't have. At that moment, I felt like everything was changing, just like the weather outside. The atmosphere in the house seemed to shift. My son took his eyes off the TV and looked at me, and I looked back at him. I didn't move my hand. I could sense the change in the air. I told my son not to panic, that these things were normal. He seemed to understand my unspoken message. After that, our routine of watching TV and sharing these special moments together continued every day. There was no one to stop us, and our relationship grew stronger day by day. My son became even more caring towards me. There's a lot more to this story, and it's far from over. This is my complete story so far, but there's more to come. If you want to follow along, you must subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon, and if you're eager for more parts, be sure to write next in the comments.